Shifting gears back to the situation in Iran and the Middle East more broadly. Joining us now, military analyst Christian Leuprecht. Thanks for being with us today, Christian.
My pleasure, Caroline.
Today, the Israeli military said it bombed a bunker that, according to reports, was the former home of the late Ayatollah. 50 fighter jets are said to have been involved in that operation, and yet we don't know why it was targeted, if it was already previously targeted, or who, more precisely, they were targeting. Do you have any insight on that operation?
Well, often it takes multiple jets because you're going to have multiple penetrations because these elements are so heavily fortified and they're often sort of also underground. So you need to sort of work your way in if you want. This is probably a signal that Israel and the United States is continuing its decapitation campaign. And so this is sort of has, I think, two objectives. One is to try to take out the hardliners and the ideologues, to give the pragmatists and the moderates some breathing room, because I think there are people who want to make concessions, but they're not the people who've been in charge of the regime, and the people who've been in charge have been vetoing in sort of any concessions. The other is, of course, it's a rational choice strategy that if you're in the leadership, it's a signal that your head is likely to roll. So you might want to come to the negotiating table and make concessions. We'll see whether that strategy worked. Was tried in Iraq and Afghanistan to moderate success.
So presumably somebody was inside that bunker, because the Israelis have not said who specifically they were targeting. There was someone inside. It wasn't just the infrastructure itself.
Right. So you would have a long targeting list of infrastructure, but then you would look to collate that with intelligence. And intelligence, of course, multi-source, everything from space to signals intelligence. But also, I mean, the drones are now providing a real-time battlefield intelligence picture of basically everybody who's moving around in Iran at any given time and intercepting all those communications. And so often, as with the initial strike on Khamenei, these are targets of opportunity where you have a high probability that what you guess is what you estimate as a high-value target is in that location. And if you're going to use that many fighter jets, then clearly that suggests that this was an opportune moment that was not going to pass.
Yeah, 50 fighter jets is no small number. Okay, shifting just for a second, Christian, to one of the other significant strikes in the last 24 hours, that being on the Azadi Sports Complex in Tehran. This is home to Iran's national soccer team, and according to local reports, one of 3 sports centers that has been bombed since this campaign began. Iran's sports minister is calling this a war crime, and there's been widespread concern about civilian centers being hit. Why would, if true, why would this have been targeted?
So hard for me to gauge on the intelligence side, but we know, for instance, that the Iranian regime has long been also playing effectively human shield, so putting military installations. You know, we saw this with Hamas in the Gaza Strip, where you would build command centers deliberately under civilian infrastructure, and so you know, these sports complexes. You know, this is a wonderful opportunity to build significant bunker infrastructure right underneath the sports complex, and then you sort of build the complex on top. So, you know, I'm speculating here, but I think the coalition is going after more than simply sports elements, and knowing that this is going to draw some perception and reaction in terms of perhaps civilian infrastructure being targeted. But let's remember that unlike the Iranian regime, every strike is being vetted by a judge advocate general, that is to say, a military lawyer, for compliance with the law of armed conflict on the Israeli side and on the U.S. side. We can, I guess, argue with perhaps some of the interpretations of that, but there's certainly no judge advocate general on the Iranian side vetting any of the Iranian strikes that are deliberately and intentionally targeting civilian infrastructure for maximum civilian harm and impact.
And just lastly, if I can, before we let you go, any indication that the Iranians are getting support from any of its allies, Russia, North Korea, anyone else?
No, to the contrary. I think it's actually made Russia and China look quite weak, because it shows that these, you know, close friendships that they extol, in the end, that nobody's coming to the rescue of Iran, and that ultimately both Venezuela and Iran were dispensable, and that neither Putin nor Xi are prepared to compromise whatever relationships they have with Trump for either Venezuela or Iran. And of course, I think this is emboldening the Trump in terms of his efforts. And I think both Israel and the United States would have gamed this out. And I think this is part of the symbolic intention of these raids, that really these countries that claim to be so strong and so forth, this is in many ways a house of cards that makes them look very weak.
Military analyst Christian Leuprecht, appreciate your time and insights as always.
My pleasure, Caroline. Thank you.